My name is Genesis. I am 34 years old and I work in finance in New York. For years, I tried everything I could to be the pride of my family, carrying the burden of hospital bills for my mother and tuition for my niece. I thought those sacrifices would at least earn me a place in their hearts. But then, at my father's birthday party in the suburbs of New Jersey, everything I believed shattered. The room was filled with laughter when I raised my glass and my phone buzzed. A bank notification flashed. Available balance, $42.13. My heart sank. That very morning, I had seen more than $120,000 in savings I had built over years. I froze, the glass trembling in my hand, while everyone else kept cheering. From the far end of the table, my brother-in-law Jake suddenly looked up, eyes full of challenge. He smirked. Maybe now, you're not the richest one in the family anymore. In that moment, I knew I had been betrayed. The question wasn't how much I had lost, but who among them had taken what I spent my life building. If it were you, could you sit still when your own family treated your sacrifices as nothing more than an open wallet? Share your feelings in the comments, hit like and subscribe to follow me through this story. Because what happened after that party was far worse and more shocking. I forced myself to swallow the dizziness, kept a stiff smile so no one but Jake could see my shaking hand. But inside my head, memories came flooding back, as if the past years existed only to lead me to this humiliating moment. From a young age, I was used to being the lifeline of the family. When my mother fell ill and stayed in the hospital for months, I was the one running paperwork and paying every hospital bill. I still remember signing that first check nearly $10,000. My hand trembled then too, but not with anger like today, rather with fear that she might not survive. I didn't think twice, I only prayed she would recover. Then came Lily, my younger sister. When she had her first child, their finances were already tight. Haley's preschool tuition piled up. One evening, Lily called, her voice trembling. "Genesis, can you help me? If I don't pay, they'll take her off the class list." I sat in my tiny apartment staring at my own unpaid bill, then opened my laptop and wired the money. I told myself it was just a small amount, that I could manage. But from that day, those small amounts became a habit. My brother Daniel wasn't better. After a failed investment, he drowned in credit card debt. One night, he knocked on my door, eyes red, voice hoarse. "You're my last hope. If I don't pay this month, the collectors will come." I sighed, pulled out my own credit card and covered his debt, knowing I'd have to work overtime for months to catch up. I comforted myself at least he would have a fresh start. But the next time, and the time after that, he still came back to me. Even my father, Paul, the man I once respected the most, leaned on me without hesitation. When he nearly lost his house to foreclosure, it was me who emptied my savings to save it. I still remember that afternoon he sat in the living room, patted my shoulder and said, "You're the strongest support this family has." Back then, those words warmed me. But now I see they weren't appreciation. They were a decree. I would always carry the load. No one ever asked me, "Do you have enough to take care of yourself? Are you tired?" Instead, every word circled around how I was more stable, free of burdens, living alone so you can manage. In their eyes, I wasn't a daughter or a sister. I was just a walking wallet. I remember a winter evening after wiring Nathan Lily's husband over $2,000 so they wouldn't be evicted. I sat curled in my tiny kitchen, eating instant noodles for dinner. Snow fell, outside, and cold seeped into my bones. I had skipped a vacation with coworkers just to send them that money. I still consoled myself. They were family. They needed me. I would have another chance, but they might not. For years I lived in that cycle, believing kindness would be understood, that sacrifice would be cherished. But all I got in return was silence, shrugs, and entitlement. Eventually, they stopped even asking. Instead, they simply informed me, "The electricity got cut, you'll handle it. Haley starts school, remember to transfer the tuition." The tone casual, natural, as if it were my duty. Each time I checked my bank account, disappointment gnawed at me. Those dwindling numbers weren't just money, they were pieces of my freedom being stripped away. I longed for the day I could spend on myself without guilt. A nice dress, a trip, a class I loved. Instead, I pinched every penny because I knew the moment the phone rang, someone would need help. In the middle of the birthday party's laughter, memories of those silent sacrifices pounded in my head. I looked around the table, my mother sitting calmly as if nothing was happening, my father engrossed in chatting with old friends, ignoring me, Lily smiling weakly, Jake staring at me with defiance. I realized then, in their eyes, I was never an equal part of this family. I was the bank with the name Genesis. I drew a deep breath, trying not to cry, but inside, a storm was rising. Maybe it was my years of silence that made them despise me. Maybe it was because I always reached out, they no longer felt the need to show respect. That question echoed in my head, wearing me down. And I knew one thing: if I stayed silent, those disappearing numbers would never stop. More importantly, I would lose every shred of dignity in front of the people I called family. I sat there, music and cheers swirling around me, but in my head only Jake's cold words echoed. Maybe now you're not the richest one in the family anymore. I wondered, had they ever thought about the nights I stayed up working to pay off their debts? The times I swallowed my own dreams so they'd have another chance? Or was I just an endless credit card to them? I set my glass down, clenched my fists. In that moment, I faced a painful truth. The love I gave my family was never seen as love, only as a permanent obligation. And that obligation, if I didn't end it, would destroy me. I stayed seated, but inside, a decision took root. I would no longer allow myself to be treated as a living ATM. I would find the truth and reclaim what was mine. I sat frozen at the table, hand gripping the phone screen, glowing with the number that made my body tremble. $42.13. That number blinked like mockery. I scrolled through the transaction history: $3,000, then $5,200, then more neat withdrawals, one after another, until only a few dollars remained. What stunned me most was the bank's note, all from the same IP address. I zoomed in, read again. No mistake. It was the home network here. The same house I had entered countless times, believing it to be my only refuge. I lifted my head, scanning the table. Familiar faces laughed, glasses raised for my father's birthday. But when my eyes met Jake's, I saw at his smirk, half amusement, half secret satisfaction. "What's wrong, Genesis?" Lily's voice floated out, her hand swirling her glass but eyes avoiding mine. I steadied myself, my voice hoarse. "My savings account has just been emptied." The music kept playing, but conversations faltered. Jake chuckled softly, adjusting his collar. "Probably just a bank error. Systems glitch sometimes." I slammed my phone onto the table, the glowing screen for everyone to see. "Not an error. Here's the transaction history, all traced to this house's Wi-Fi." The lively room fell still. My father Paul frowned, but it didn't look up from his plate. He shrugged, his tone unnervingly calm. "Probably some mistake. Don't cause a scene at the party." My mother Donna waved her hand lightly. "Genesis, you're too sensitive. Forget it, enjoy yourself. We're celebrating your father's birthday." I turned to Lily, desperate for some explanation. She only lowered her eyes. Jake leaned back smugly, as if he had already won. My fists clenched, fingers numb. "Lily, do you have something to say to me?" She pressed her lips, shook her head. I don't know anything." Jake cut in, his voice dripping with sarcasm. "Maybe you forgot to log out when you used the computer here. Someone saw it, pressed a few buttons, and that was it. If you want to blame someone, blame your own carelessness." I turned to him, eyes locked, unblinking. "So, you're admitting you saw my account?" He raised an eyebrow, smirked. "I only said it was a possibility." "But Genesis, you live alone? No husband, no children. What's all that money for? Sometimes, sharing a little with family doesn't hurt." That sentence cut into me like a blade. My whole life of hard work and sacrifice, reduced to a cheap excuse. I turned to my parents, my voice catching. Dad, Mom, did you hear that? My account has been wiped out, and instead of worrying, you all treat it like it's nothing? My father set down his fork and looked up for the first time. His eyes held no anger on my behalf, only irritation at being disturbed. Genesis, don't use such harsh words. We're family. Don't turn a small issue into something big. My mother sighed, her voice soft, as if soothing a difficult child. You always overreact. Families need each other to survive. You have a stable job, while Lily and Jake struggle much more. I clenched my teeth. So, everyone knew? No one answered. The room grew heavy, filled only with music and the laughter of children playing in the distance. Jake sat, his wineglass down, stared at me, and spoke low but loud enough for everyone to hear. The truth is, we only took what you had extra. You don't lack for anything. But without that help, Lily and I wouldn't survive. In the end, it's all for family. A short laugh escaped his throat, and I knew I hadn't imagined the mockery in it. I inhaled sharply, my hand trembling as I fought not to cry right there. I looked at Lily, hoping she would say something to soften it. But she only whispered, "Don't make this a big deal, sis. You'll earn it back." "Earn it back?" I repeated, my voice breaking. Lily, that was my sweat, my overtime hours, the vacations I gave up. Do you even know how much I've sacrificed for this family? My sister stayed silent. My father had already turned back to his plate. My mother shook her head slightly, as if I were selfish for not accepting what they called normal. I shot to my feet, the chair scraping hard against the floor. The entire room froze, all eyes on me. I spoke slowly, each word trembling but resolute. If you think I'll let this pass like all the times before, just wait. I will uncover the truth, and when that happens, none of you will be laughing. The air turned to ice. Jake let out a mocking chuckle. So dramatic. But remember, Genesis' family is family. No one out there will take your side. I didn't answer. I grabbed my phone, clenched it in my hand, and walked quickly to the door. Outside, the cold wind slapped my face, light rain falling. I breathed deeply, letting the damp air fill my lungs, trying to push away the suffocating weight in my chest. Driving back, my mind spun with the images that had just unfolded. Jake's contemptuous words, Lily's evasive eyes, my parents' chilling indifference. I opened my banking app again, scrolling through the endless red withdrawals. Each number wasn't just money, it was a slap to my trust. I pulled over to the side of the road, staring at the phone screen. My heart pounded, part from shock, part from the rising ache. In that moment, I understood this wasn't about money anymore. It was raw betrayal, a message that, to them, I wasn't a daughter or a sister, but an endless wallet. Rain drummed on the windshield. I leaned my head back, gripping the steering wheel. From deep inside, one thought rang clear as a bell. They had taken everything, believing I would stay silent as always. But they were wrong. I would not be silent again. I stood for a long time under the porch, drizzle falling on the steps. Laughter still spilled faintly from the living room, but inside me was only suffocating quiet. I turned to see Lily coming toward me, her face taut with worry, afraid I would scream in the middle of the party. Jake trailed behind, hands shoved in his pockets, his expression casual, as if this was just a petty quarrel. I drew a long breath, forcing my voice steady. Lily, can you explain? Why was my account drained, and why was the IP address from this house? She stammered, eyes wet but unable to meet mine. I don't know what to say. Jake cut in, his tone even, tinged with mockery. There's nothing to stress over. We needed it more. Genesis, you live alone. No husband, no kids, no real burdens. That money means nothing to you, but for us it's survival. I whipped my head toward him, anger surging. So you're admitting it was you? He shrugged, smirked. Calling it stealing isn't right. Sharing is more accurate. In a family, those who have more help those who have less. That's natural. Sharing? My voice cracked. Sharing is when we sit down, talk, and agree. This was outright theft. You know, every dollar was earned through sleepless nights, sacrifices, and you dare call that sharing? Jake didn't flinch. He even stepped closer, lowering his voice but still taunting. Genesis, you should thank us. Without us, you'd just keep sitting in your tiny apartment, hoarding money you'd never use. At least we put it to good use. Keeping this roof, paying Haley's tuition, keeping Lily from hitting rock bottom. I turned to Lily, begging her to object, to defend me. But she only bit her lip, eyes glistening, then gave the slightest nod, a silent admission. My heart dropped. My own sister, the one who used to cry in my arms when we were children, now chose silence and betrayal. I stepped back, forcing my voice not to break. Lily, what did I ever do to make you think I deserved this? For years, I never once refused your pleas. And today, you let Jake tell me my money means nothing. She exhaled shakily, murmuring as if to justify herself. You don't understand. Jake and I are exhausted. I'm terrified of losing the house, of my child losing her school. I just thought, you can earn it back. We can't. I let out a bitter laugh, sharper than any tear. So I meant to bear it all, simply because you think I'll survive better than you? No one answered. Only the sound of rain and faint laughter carried from the house. I turned to go back in when my mother's voice called out the moment I opened the door. Genesis, what are you doing out there so long? Are you trying to ruin your father's birthday? Come inside. Don't spoil it. I looked at her. Her face was calm, as if nothing had happened. I swallowed the lump in my throat, but couldn't shake the feeling the whole world had turned its back on me. I'm not ruining anything, Mom, I said, low but firm. The ones ruining things are those who trample on my effort and my trust. She frowned, shook her head. Genesis, you're always too rigid. Family life isn't always fair. You live alone, have a good job, no one to worry about. Your siblings are different, they have families to raise. I clenched my fists, nails biting into my skin. So you knew about this all along? She didn't answer, only turned away, asking the server to bring out more cake. In that moment, a chill shot down my spine. No longer suspicion, truth. Naked and undeniable. They all knew, and they treated it as normal. I inhaled sharply, swallowing the tightness in my chest. I turned to Jake and Lily, speaking slowly, each word carving into the air. If you think I'll accept this like before, you're mistaken. I am no longer Genesis, who stays silent while being used. Jake laughed, the sound slicing through the silence like a knife. As if you could change anything. Genesis, in the end, you're still all alone. I looked straight into his eyes, my gaze no longer trembling. Alone is better than being treated by my own family like a walking wallet. Then I turned and walked back into the house, not letting anyone stop me. The laughter from the party, the cheerful music, the warm golden lights, all of it suddenly felt foreign. I sat down, but inside I was frozen. Everyone else kept talking, taking pictures, singing for my father's birthday. Only, I stayed quiet, the red wine in my glass turning bitter in my throat. I could no longer hear the voices around me, just the heavy pounding of my heart and Jake's cold words echoing in my mind. We needed it more. You live alone. That money means nothing. I knew. From that moment, there was a crack between me and my family that would never heal. I sat in the corner of the table, but my thoughts drifted back through the years. Memories I had buried rushed back like a slow-motion film. Today's exploitation wasn't new, it was just too blatant now to ignore. I remembered nearly 10 years ago, when Daniel, my brother, called me late at night. His voice was hoarse from alcohol and exhaustion. Genesis, my credit card debt is over $10,000. If I don't pay immediately, they'll sue. I was a new employee back then, just received my first paycheck. I still had student loans hanging over me. But when he said, I'm about to lose everything, my heart softened. I withdrew all the money I had and paid it off for him, then worked extra shifts, sleepless nights. All he said was a short, thanks, then disappeared for months, never asking how I managed afterward. Then there was Lily. I still remember that afternoon when she called, panicked. Genesis, the landlord posted a notice. If we don't pay, we'll be out next week. I had planned to use my small savings to fix the leaking kitchen sink in my rented apartment. But hearing her child crying in the background, I couldn't bear it. I wired 3 months' rent right away. She sobbed, "You're my savior." But a week later, she called again. "Can you give me a little more? Haley needs medicine." I also remembered my father sitting in the living room, weary after months of unemployment. He said, "The car's broken. I can't get to interviews. Can't find work. Genesis, I have no one but you." Quietly, I signed for a used car, draining almost all the savings I had built over 2 years. He patted my shoulder, his eyes lit up. "You really are the backbone of this family." Back then, I felt proud. Now I see it wasn't praise. It was him assigning me a permanent role, the carrier of burdens. Each time, no one asked if I could handle it. No one cared whether I wanted to. As long as I breathed and worked, it meant I had to open my wallet. They grew so used to that idea that they stopped hiding it, even treating it as my duty. I clearly remember one time I refused. Lily wanted me to cover a furniture loan for her new apartment. I said gently, "I'm saving for a place of my own. You and Jake need to figure it out." Lily stayed quiet for a moment, then burst into tears. "You always think about yourself. What about me? I'm your sister." I bit my lip, softened again. In the end, I still transferred the money. Another winter night, I sat eating instant noodles in my small apartment under the dim kitchen light. Snow fell outside, but I didn't dare run the heater too long because the electric bill was already over budget. I hugged a pillow as my phone lit up with a message from Dad. "Daughter, you're more stable than the rest of us. Please cover this month again." I closed my eyes, sighed. I had lived like that for years, giving up every small dream just to keep them afloat. I don't remember exactly when I became the one who handled everything. All I know is that slowly, they stopped seeing me as Genesis, a person with feelings, dreams, and needs. They saw me as a resource, a financial source they could call at any time. I used to think love meant sacrifice. I used to believe that if I was patient and generous enough, one day they would look back and say, "Genesis, we're grateful for you." But that day never came. Instead, when I delayed responding or hesitated, I was labeled selfish. And now, when I discovered my life savings had disappeared, in one evening, they brushed it off as if it were normal. My father shrugged. My mother said, "Don't ruin the fun." Lily stayed silent, and Jake mocked me for living alone, as if I had no right to need money. Memories of running around to pay their debts, sleepless nights working overtime, skipping little joys for myself, all of it pressed down on me. I realized I had been labeled long ago. Labeled the carrier. And once labeled, I had no right to refuse. I sat there, my glass trembling in my hand. Surrounded by laughter, I felt crushing loneliness. I wondered, had they ever truly seen me as part of the family, or was I just a tool to keep them afloat? Jake's eyes stayed relaxed, as if he knew I wouldn't act. Lily still wouldn't look up. My mother chatted with friends as though she hadn't heard a word. My father cut another piece of cake, eating calmly. No one stopped to think that I had just lost the future I built. In that moment, I understood the cycle would never end unless I ended it. I had let them exploit me so long they saw it as their right. If I didn't rise, didn't say enough, I would remain chained in their invisible circle. I straightened in my chair, inhaled deeply, feeling my heart pound. I had lived carrying and covering for so long, but now I knew I had to prepare for something else. A new Genesis, no longer a living ATM. When I left the birthday party, I didn't look back. The rain that night felt like it wanted to wash everything away, but inside me, the bitterness only thickened. I drove through wet streets blurred by lights, straight back to my small apartment. That apartment, which often felt lonely, became the only place I still felt safe. I hung my coat, didn't turn on the lights, and sat down at my desk. The pale glow of my laptop lit my face. I opened the financial folder I had kept for years, pulling up every email, every statement, every piece of evidence of all I had covered for my family. There were hospital bills for my mother, stamped, paid by Genesis. Tuition receipts for Haley, my niece, sent to me in midnight panic. Messages from Daniel begging for thousands to cover urgent credit card debt, a car contract under my name, used by my father. Each page, each line, cut into me. I opened a new Excel sheet. On the left column, I wrote each relative's name, then filled in the amounts they had taken. I categorized hospital, tuition, rent, car, credit cards. The totals climbed until I froze in place. Over $200,000. That was my youth years of sacrifice traded for indifference. I leaned back, eyes closed. Rain still tapped the window. I didn't cry. My tears were long gone. Only a sharp, cold clarity remained. Then my eyes caught the last transaction. Nearly $20,000. Not Lily, not Jake, not Daniel. The note read, Paul Grant, Sunrise Development LLC. I shot upright, heart pounding. Paul Grant, my father. Sunrise Development LLC? I had never heard of it. I opened my browser, typed it in. The result? A small company registered in suburban New Jersey, in real estate. I scrolled to the legal registration. Official representative, Paul Grant. I couldn't believe my eyes. My father had been retired for nearly a decade, complaining of no money, living off a modest pension. He once looked me straight in the eye and said, "Without you, I couldn't survive." And yet, here he was listed as the head of a company, and the last of my money had gone there. A hollow laugh escaped me, echoing through the silent apartment. The man I thought was a victim was in fact the deepest player. I went back to my spreadsheet, added a new line. Paul, 20,000, Sunrise Development LLC. At the bottom, I typed in bold. No longer coincidence. This is a plan. In my mind, everything began to connect. It wasn't just the little requests for help. It wasn't just the transfers I willingly made. This was orchestrated. Someone had quietly used my trust like a key, unlocking every door to drain me. And my father was the biggest link. I stood up, walked to the window, staring down at the rain-soaked street. Below, car lights flickered across the wet pavement. I thought about all the years I had worked myself to the bone, sacrificed, believing I was holding my family together. But maybe, in their eyes, I was nothing more than a long-term source of capital to fuel their shady plans. My phone buzzed. A text from my mother. Genesis, I hope you got home safe. Don't be upset, things will pass. You live alone, don't take it to heart. Call your father tomorrow. I stared at the words, hollow inside. They still believed I would stay silent. They still thought I would keep swallowing it, like all the years before. I turned back to my desk, opened a new folder, and named it The Truth. I saved every receipt, every statement, every transfer, along with the link to Sunrise Development's corporate file. Each document labeled, numbered, neatly arranged. I logged every detail: date, amount, recipient, purpose. The spreadsheet filled with cold numbers. Each number was a piece of evidence, a fragment of the betrayal I had unknowingly documented for years. I sat upright, fingers on the keyboard, eyes bright in the glow of the screen. There was no more trembling in me, only a steel determination. I knew I couldn't confront them outright yet. I needed evidence. I needed a plan. And I would not let anyone in this family turn me into a victim again. Outside, the heavy rain slowed, leaving behind a bleak night sky. Inside me, another storm was quietly forming, and it would sweep away every lie they had built. A week after the night I discovered the final transfer in my father's name, the phone rang. My mother's voice was light as mist. Genesis, the family wants to have dinner with you. We should talk. Don't let misunderstandings last. I was silent, for a long moment, then agreed. I wanted to hear with my own ears how they planned to justify themselves. That evening, I arrived at the old house with a hard folder in my hand. The smell of grilled meat drifted through the kitchen, The clink of silverware against plates filled the room. On the surface, it looked like a warm family dinner. But the air was heavy, everyone cautious. Lily sat pressed against her husband, eyes darting away whenever I looked. Daniel sat sullen and quiet, while my father at the head of the table wore a calmness so cold it chilled me. When the main dish was served, my father set down his utensils and looked straight at me. His voice didn't circle around. Genesis, you must understand, this wasn't stealing. It was a joint investment. You had the money, we used it to put into the company. When the company thrives, everyone benefits. The table went silent, only the ticking of the wall clock filled the room. I sat tall, eyes locked on him. A faint smile tugged at my lips. I opened the folder, placed it on the table, and slid it toward him. You call it an investment? Then can you explain to me why Sunrise Development, the company under your name, declared bankruptcy 8 months ago? The sound drained out of the room. Lily's eyes widened. Daniel finally looked up. Jake's fists tightened. My father stiffened, his face briefly faltering before slipping back into calm. Where did you read that? The internet is full of false reports. I gently pulled out a certified document stamped in red from the State Business Registry. Not the internet, Dad. Official records. Your company has been dissolved. In other words, the last of my savings went into a bottomless pit. My mother coughed lightly, forcing a smile. Genesis, you're too sensitive. Your father just wanted to try something. If the company revived, the whole family would benefit. I stared at her. Did you know about this beforehand? She looked away, her hand shaking as she lifted a glass of water. Families have to trust each other. Don't think so negatively. Jake lost his composure, slamming his hand on the table. What do you plan to do with that paperwork? Call the police? His voice was sharp, his eyes flashing with fear. I tilted my head, looked straight at him. Are you afraid I'll call the police? If I did, the first in trouble would be my father, then you and Lily. I haven't decided yet, but I want everyone here to face the truth. Daniel, silent until now, finally spoke. Genesis, you can't possibly understand the pressure we're under. You're single, you only have to care for yourself. We have families, children. We did this just to survive. I turned to him, my voice cold. Daniel, do you remember who paid your credit card debts over and over? Who kept your house from foreclosure? Survive how? By turning me into an endless wallet? Lily burst into tears, covering her face. I'm sorry, sis. I never wanted it to be like this. Jake yanked her hand down. Stop crying. Genesis, you have no right to judge. Family is about sacrificing for each other. I clenched my fists, my words sharp and deliberate. Sacrifice is when I choose it. This was betrayal. You never asked, you just took. And worse, my father turned it into a failed business scheme and buried it as if it were nothing. No one said another word. The ceiling fan hummed above, the only sound in the thick silence. My father tapped the table lightly, his voice calm but firm. Genesis, you're educated. You should know that once it's family, all property is shared. What you call betrayal is just your selfish view. I looked at him for a long time, and in that moment I no longer saw the man who once taught me to ride a bike. I only saw a man justifying his greed with blood ties. I stood, gathering the folder into my bag. My voice rang out, cold enough to startle even me. If family means I must stay silent while you take everything, then maybe I don't have a family anymore. Jake half rose, ready to speak, but Lily pulled him back, tears streaming. Daniel lowered his head, unable to meet my eyes. My father leaned back, gaze deep but wordless. I turned to leave the dining room. Behind me, my mother's frail voice called out, Genesis, think again. We're still one family. I paused for a few seconds, then answered softly without turning. One family doesn't mean one shared wallet. And I walked away, leaving behind a silence heavier than the thunder outside. I still stood at the doorway, the folder heavy in my hand. No one dared breathe too loud. Jake remained half out of his chair, veins taut, while Lily trembled, clutching his hand, eyes swollen. My father sat with arms crossed, feigning calm, and my mother gripped her glass of water as if it were her lifeline. I turned back, scanning each familiar yet distant face. My voice dropped, slow and firm. No, I'm not calling the police. Not yet. I've reported it to the bank and to the IRS. The air froze. Then the clatter of a spoon hitting the table echoed sharp and dry. My mother stammered. Genesis, what did you say? The IRS? I nodded, my eyes never leaving my father. Yes, I've sent them everything, including the records of Sunrise Development. Do you want to hear the bad news from me, or wait until the investigators knock on your door? My father's face paled in that rare moment. He clenched his fists, then forced his voice back to calm. What do you think you'll gain from this? You're only going to bring this entire family down. No, Dad, I answered, eyes still fixed on him. I'm not the one destroying this family. You did that the moment you stole the last of my money and threw it into a bankrupt company. I'm doing one thing, ending this charade. Lily broke into sobs, her voice shaking. Sis, you can't do this. If the IRS gets involved, we'll lose everything. Haley, she needs a home, a school. I looked at my sister, a flicker of pity rising before anger washed it away. Haley needs honest parents, Lily. Not a mother who steals from her sister and lets her husband laugh in my face as if it's his right. Jake slammed the table so hard a glass tipped over, spilling across the tablecloth. He growled. What do you want? Money? Do you want us to get on our knees and beg? Say it. I didn't blink. I want justice. I want you all to understand that money isn't something you can just take whenever you want. I want you held accountable for every dollar you stole from me. My father leaned back in his chair, smirking. Genesis, you're delusional. Do you think the IRS will believe one angry woman against her entire family? Did you forget who raised you? What I felt wasn't anger anymore, it was sadness. Yes, you raised me. And I paid it back many times over. With money, with my youth, with years I didn't live for myself. Are you telling me that wasn't enough? My mother suddenly shot up, her voice trembling but harsh. Genesis, you're destroying this family. If this gets out, our reputation will be gone. People will laugh at us. I sighed, looking at her. Mom, this family has been destroyed for a long time. From the moment you all chose to take my trust and turn it into an endless bank account. The room filled with Lily's sobs, Jake's heavy breathing, my father's rigid silence, and my mother's panicked eyes. I was so calm it even surprised me. Jake lunged forward, his face red. You'll regret this. If you drag the IRS into this, they'll take the house. Do you want your parents on the street? I answered firmly. If this house exists on lies, it's not a home anymore. I won't protect a roof built on stolen money. Lily clutched my sleeve, crying hard. Please, Genesis, give us a chance. I promise we'll pay it back slowly. Don't bring the IRS into it. I looked down at her, my chest tightening. Lily, I've given you more chances than I can count. And each time, you stayed silent while your husband humiliated me. Do you expect me to believe this time will be different? She froze, her eyes hollow with despair. Finally, my father lost his restraint and slammed the table. Enough. Genesis, you're making yourself the enemy of your own family. If you don't retract what you sent, I'll no longer consider you my daughter. I raised my head, holding his gaze. Maybe you've forgotten, but you cast me aside first. Not today, but all those years when you treated me as nothing more than a source of money. The air shattered. My mother collapsed back into her chair, her face ghostly pale. Jake ground his teeth, while Daniel, my brother, kept silent, his eyes fixed on the floor, avoiding everyone's stare. I packed the folder back into my bag and walked out of the dining room with my spine straight. Lily's voice called after me, sobbing, Genesis, please. Think of Haley. I stopped, turned back, locking eyes with her tear-streaked face. My voice broke but stayed clear. I am thinking of Haley. That's why I want her to grow up knowing the difference between right and wrong. And the right thing now is for the truth to come out. With that, I turned away, leaving the room in chaos, the last of their lies stripped bare. I stepped onto the porch and drew a deep breath. The night was windless, but inside me, the storm had truly begun. Just days after that tense reconciliation dinner, everything began to crash down like dominoes. I was at the office when my phone buzzed nonstop. The first text was from my mother. "Genesis, we're in trouble. The IRS sent a notice to the house. They said they'll be auditing all of the family's tax records." I sat frozen, staring at the screen. I knew this was coming, but I hadn't expected it. So soon. Only 2 days after I sent the documents, the tax authorities had acted. That afternoon, I stopped by the mailroom in my building. Amid junk mail, there was an envelope with the IRS logo, addressed directly to me. I tore it open right there. The message was clear. They had received the information I provided and would launch a full audit of the Grant family's finances. I folded the letter, slipped it into my bag, and walked back to my apartment. On the way, I felt an odd calm settle over me. The anger I'd carried seemed to dissolve, leaving only a cold, steady resolve. The next day, my phone rang relentlessly. I didn't plan to answer, but eventually I picked up. It was Lily, her voice cracked with tears. "Genesis, please. The IRS came to see us. Jake's been suspended from work while they investigate. If he loses his job, we'll have nothing left. Help us one last time, I'm begging you." I closed my eyes, taking a long breath. "Lily, do you remember how many times you called something the last time? You called me in the middle of the night, crying, and I opened my wallet. For years, I've saved your life. Jake's life. But not this time." "But Haley?" Lily broke down, crying her daughter's name. I cut in, my voice slow but firm. "Because of Haley, you need to learn responsibility. She needs parents who can stand on their own, not an aunt who carries the whole family forever." The line filled with her muffled sobs. I said nothing more, just quietly hung up. 2 days later, another call came. It was my father, his voice no longer calm but harsh, edged with desperation. "Genesis, you're a traitor. We gave you everything, and you went and betrayed your own family. Do you realize you're killing your parents with this?" I pressed the phone to my ear, holding steady. "A traitor? No, Dad. Betrayal is when you took all my money without asking. Betrayal is when you turned my trust into a bankrupt company and covered it up. All I did was tell the truth. And if the truth destroys you, that's not on me." He stayed silent for a few seconds, then hung up. I sat in my apartment, staring at the dark screen, a sadness I couldn't name rising inside me. But I didn't cry. My tears for them had dried up long ago. In the days that followed, the news came crashing in. The IRS demanded every document tied to Sunrise Development. My parents' joint account was frozen for investigation. Jake's pay was suspended after they uncovered suspicious transfers from my account into his. One evening, Lily showed up at my apartment door, eyes swollen, clutching her daughter tight. "Genesis, please open the door. I have no one else to turn to." I stood on the other side, my hand on the knob. I heard Haley's small voice ask, "Mom, why won't Aunt Genesis open the door?" My heart clenched, but I didn't unlock it. I only spoke through the wood, my voice low and heavy. "Lily, I don't hate you, but I can't keep being the crutch for this family. If you want to do right by Haley, start by standing on your own." There was quiet sobbing, then footsteps fading away. I stayed there for a long time, my forehead pressed against the cold wood, my chest tight. The next day, I received an email from the law office representing the IRS, confirming that the evidence I had provided was crucial to their investigation. They thanked me for cooperating for transparency and fairness. I read those lines over and over, feeling both empty and relieved. One evening, my mother called. Her voice was tired, raspy. "Genesis, what more do you want? Why do you have to push your parents to the edge? We just want to live in peace." I froze, then answered slowly, "Mom, you call that peace? Peace built on draining my money? On treating me like a bottomless wallet? If you really wanted peace, you should have stopped this long ago." On the other end, there was only a weary sigh. I knew. She had no defense left. News about my family spread faster than I expected. Neighbors began whispering when they saw IRS agents at my parents' door. Jake officially lost his job after 2 weeks of suspension. Daniel lived in constant fear as his old credit card debt was dragged back up with no one to cover it. The whole family crumbled, some angry, some desperate, some in tears. As for me, I kept living my days, going to work, returning to my quiet apartment, cooking a simple dinner, then sitting at my desk to review the documents. I didn't feel joy over their downfall, but I felt calm, because at last the vicious cycle of so many years had stopped. For a moment, I remembered my father's words at the reconciliation dinner. Family means sharing. I closed my eyes, whispering to myself, sharing doesn't mean taking everything without asking. And I felt clearly that I had broken free from the chains of being the one who carries it all. I filed for a place, 3-month leave of absence. I didn't feel guilty choosing to step away from both work and family. I packed my things into the car and drove north. The long road pulled me away from the city's gray towers, through autumn forests blazing red. I stopped at a small town in Vermont, a place I had once passed through on a work trip years ago. Back then, I had wished, if only one day I could live here, quiet and free. The town welcomed me with a roadside cafe, quaint wooden houses, and the friendly eyes of strangers. I rented a small cabin facing the mountains and began piecing my life back together. Every morning, I brewed a cup of coffee, opened the windows to let sunlight flood in, and felt my heart grow lighter. One afternoon, as I sat in the town library flipping through the thick folder I had carried with me, a familiar voice called from behind. "Genesis? Is that you?" I looked up, startled. Standing before me was Jamie, an old college classmate. I still remembered him, the leader of our study group, with a dream of becoming a lawyer for justice. More than 10 years later, he had grown into a composed man, wearing a simple but sharp suit. "Jamie?" I smiled, both surprised and glad. "What are you doing here?" "I run a law office in Burlington, specializing in financial and civil disputes. Sometimes I come here to work a few days." He sat across from me, his eyes glancing at the folder. "And you? What's with the serious look?" I stayed quiet for a few seconds, then gently slid the folder toward him. "Jamie, I just went through something I can barely believe myself. This is all the evidence of how my family stole from me for years." He turned page after page, his expression growing colder. I sat still, letting painful memories rush back with every line, every number. After a long while, Jamie closed the folder and looked straight at me. "Genesis, you're not only entitled to protect what's left of your money, you have every right to reclaim what was taken. They didn't just betray your trust, they broke the law. Do you want to file a lawsuit?" I stayed silent, my heart racing. The thought had crossed my mind before, but I never dared to believe it. To sue my own family, it sounded like a wound that would never heal. But Jamie's steady gaze made me see one truth. If I didn't, the cycle would never end. "I want to," I said slowly, my voice trembling but firm. "Not just to get the money back. I want to put an end to it." Jamie nodded, a small, encouraging smile on his face. "All right, I'll help you. But remember, this won't be easy. They'll fight back, smear you, try to break you. Are you ready for that?" I took a deep breath and nodded. I've spent my life enduring. Now it's time to live for what's mine. The following months were long but meaningful. Jamie and I worked together to prepare the lawsuit. He carefully reviewed every document I had kept, cross-checked them with bank statements, IRS records, and Sunrise Development's bankruptcy files. Some nights, I sat alone in the cabin, reading my prepared testimony, my chest tightening. But then I remembered Jake's mocking smile, Lily's silence, my father's threats, and I kept going. On the first day in court, I walked in with clenched hands. My father sat across, his face cold, my mother avoiding my gaze. Jake pretended to be indifferent, but his eyes betrayed worry. Lily clung to him, her hands tight, shoulders trembling. Daniel didn't even show up. The judge read the charges. I heard each word like a knife slicing through the air. Tax fraud, financial abuse, unauthorized use of personal information. I inhaled deeply, steadying my gaze. Jamie stood, his voice clear and commanding. Your Honor, my client is not here for revenge. She is here to reclaim the life stolen from her. This is not only about money, it is about dignity, the right to live free. In that moment, I felt a weight lift from me. After years of silence, I was finally being heard. The trial dragged on for months, with heated debates and manipulative defenses from my family. Jake tried to blame me for being careless. Lily cried for sympathy. My father claimed he only wanted to provide for the family. But the evidence was undeniable. And then, Judgment Day arrived. I sat still, hands clasped tightly. The judge struck the gavel, his voice ringing in the hushed room. Jake and Lily Walker are ordered to repay all funds taken, along with civil penalties. Paul Grant is found guilty of tax fraud, subject to financial penalties and special supervision. I sat there, hearing each word like a bell toll, not triumph, but release. My father bowed his head, my mother burst into tears. Jake slammed his fist on the table in rage, and Lily collapsed into her chair, shaking uncontrollably. I looked at them, but felt no hatred. Only the simple truth. I was free. As I left the courtroom, Jamie walked beside me, his hand gently on my shoulder. Genesis, you did what many never dare. I hope now you can finally live for yourself. I lifted my eyes to Vermont's clear blue sky, the cool wind brushing past. In that moment, I knew I had freed myself from a lifetime of being used. And even though my family had shattered, I carried no more resentment, because at last, I had found myself again. My new apartment in Vermont sat on a quiet street, its windows opening to deep green mountains and rows of trees shifting with the seasons. Each morning, I brewed hot tea, sat at my small wooden table, and watched sunlight pour through the glass. On rainy days, as the wind whistled across the roof, I felt a strange peace. Not the peace of others' silence, but the peace of my own choice. I began journaling regularly. One evening, I wrote on a blank page. I didn't lose my family. I just stopped letting them treat me like a bank. As the pen scratched the paper, my heart felt lighter. For years, I clung to the belief that family was unchangeable. But in truth, family isn't blood tied by debt and exploitation. Family is where respect exists. And I no longer had that. I rebuilt my life piece by piece. I signed up for an evening painting class at the town's art center. The smell of oil paint, the sound of brushes sweeping across canvas, and the joy of watching colors slowly take shape brought back a feeling I thought I had lost. I learned to let go, to let my mind float with shades of color instead of cold numbers on financial spreadsheets. Not just for myself, I also began to think about other women who had been in situations like mine. I reached out to Jamie, and together we created a small investment fund. It wasn't meant to bring huge profits, but to support women striving for financial independence, women who wanted to escape dependency. I wanted them to have the chance to stand on their own, so no one would ever be turned into a living ATM in their own family like I had been. The day I signed the fund's charter, I smiled for a long time. I knew I had come a long way from being seen as an endless source of money to someone who could give others the chance to stand on their own feet. One weekend afternoon, as I was tidying my desk, my laptop chimed with an email. I opened it, surprised to see the sender, Haley Lily's daughter. The subject line was simple, Aunt Genesis. I froze for a moment, then slowly clicked. In the email, clumsy but heartfelt words appeared. Aunt Genesis, thank you for teaching me how to take care of myself. At home, Mom and Dad argue about money a lot, but I've learned not to rely on others. I've started saving from tutoring money and odd jobs. I want to buy my own things one day without asking anyone. I miss you. I sat still, my eyes burning. Haley, the child once caught in the cycle of dependence, now understood what the adults around her refused to. I smiled, typing a few. gentle lines in reply. Sweetheart, I'm so proud of you. Always believe that independence will bring you true freedom and happiness. I'll always be watching over you, even from afar. I hit send, then leaned back in my chair, watching the golden sunset spill across the mountains. In that moment, I realized that sometimes walking away from toxic ties isn't losing family. It's opening another door where a new generation can learn to live with meaning, to love without turning someone else into a burden. In the days that followed, I lived slowly but fully. I spent time cooking meals I loved, bought a red dress I had once hesitated over, and hung my own paintings on the walls. I sat in pottery class with clay-stained hands and a light heart. I started building connections with new friends in town, people who didn't care how much money I had, but simply asked, "How are you feeling today?" One day, Jamie stopped by, looked at me, and said with a smile, "Genesis, you're different now. Your eyes are bright again," I replied, "because for the first time, I'm living for myself." That night, I opened my journal again, adding a line under the old one. I didn't lose my family. I just chose to redefine family. And when the pen lifted from the page, I knew I had truly found freedom. I closed the journal and looked out the window at the soft silver moonlight. A quiet peace rose inside me, something I hadn't felt in years. Perhaps the most precious thing wasn't the money I got back, but the right to live a life unbound by unfair expectations. But I still wonder, if it were you, what would you do in my place? Would you dare to stand up, set boundaries against your own blood, to protect your dignity and your life? Or would you keep enduring, sacrificing yourself just to hold on to the word family? I truly want to hear your thoughts. Share your feelings in the comments, because every story is a perspective, and sometimes your experience might help someone else trapped in a situation like mine find their way out. If this story touched your heart, don't forget to follow the channel so we can continue exploring more stories about family, difficult choices, and how we rediscover our strength in the face of family struggles. I believe each story isn't just for listening, it's a mirror to reflect on our own lives.